the true story of the sickest band in the universe. Oh, wait. World? I can't read.
The Uniworld.
Yeah, sickest band in the uniworld. Welcome to I Hope You Suffer.
Sickest band in the unibrow.
Just gonna leave it. This is episode 221, I'm gonna say. I'll figure out when that is and just release it then. Of I Hope You Suffer. My name is Nathan. I'm Kit. I'm Katie. I'm gonna have to keep that up the whole episode now. Yeah, no kidding.
Just like leaning side to side to like do the voice.
Yeah, I'll just go to like different sides of my microphone.
Is that actually what I Hope You Suffer has been this whole time? It's actually just been you.
No, the secret is it's been Katie the whole time because of her perfect impersonations. So yeah, it's me, No Kit and Katie, and I'm here with Dylan from Diary of Doom, as you can hear.
Yeah.
And we are going to talk about 2021/2022's This is GWAR. And probably just a lot about GWAR and kind of metal in general. I had been kind of following this documentary once it got like announced because I was like, it's weird. Like I have this very weird fascination with GWAR to the where like I really like them, but they're a band that like I'll listen to once in like a year, and I'll listen to them like heavily for like a month, then I won't listen to them for like the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But like for like a month every year, I'll get like fucking obsessed with them. Where like the only thing I'll listen to is I'll just do their whole discography and then start over again and shit. And so, like, one of the things I was always like really fascinated by was kind of like I was always curious what like interpersonal dynamics, like all of like the art making kind of aspect of it, and kind of shit that like you didn't really get to see until the documentary came out. So once it was announced, I was like heavily anticipating getting to see it. So once it hit Shudder and I got to watch it, like I watched it like I don't know 1 o'clock in the morning after it hit Shudder the day it came out because I was that anticipated for it, and was like pretty shocked at how good it is. It's just even like taking being a fan of GWAR out of it, like it's a pretty fascinating documentary on how a group of like outsider artists could build this thing while also kind of secretly probably all hating each other and not communicating well, and like very like big behind the music fucking vibes in it for a big portion, especially when you get into like the Dave Brockie, Hunter Jackson shit.
It's weird how kind of classically rock and roll story it kind of felt, but at the same time is just still so weird in how it came about. And I guess I didn't really know the background of the band super well, because for me, GWAR was one of those bands that like you just like knew about. Like even if you had, I felt like even a cursory knowledge of like what heavy metal was, probably this was like something that people thought of, you know, in terms of heavy metal. In fact, it makes me think back to being at like a summer camp thing like at the school, and like one of the counselors like because we were at the time working counselor because we had attended it previously, and we were like helping build like the props or something, and then we were really into Nine Inch Nails at the time, and one of the counselors accused us of listening to disgusting death metal, and I was like, we were like, what? It's like not. They're two completely different things, but it kind of makes sense because this is probably like what people's cursory knowledge of, which is like obviously it seems very repulsive and off-putting, but for somebody who like me who was raised with parents who like could understand and appreciate music, like GWAR was generally considered like, yeah, GWAR's cool. They're just like a crazy, insane metal band that do stage theatrics, and there's nothing really wrong with that because we all know that this is not real. So I just like have some fun or whatever. And so like they just are kind of maybe one of those bands that actually like I didn't really listen to the music for a long time. I think I've only listened to a little bit of GWAR. That being said, I have seen them. So they are like one of those bands that you just like know about because of, well, everything that they talk about in the documentary.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like I like the first time I watched it, it like brought this weird like just rush of these like memories of being in like junior high, and like I had like I feel like at that point I'd probably seen Empire Records, and like I was like at that point like so I had like the sort of different upbringing than most people did when it came to getting into metal, where like metal was like the first genre of music I was into because my parents were into metal. So like my mom's favorite bands from like the moment I was like around were like Metallica, Pantera, Slayer, like all of that shit, like Megadeth, Anthrax was just playing in my house my entire life. So like my favorite band, I have class pictures in like elementary school where I'm wearing like a Metallica tour shirt and shit that like my parents got me. And so I was like pretty heavily into a lot of kind of, like I don't want to say underground metal, but like kind of started digging into the level under like the Metallicas and fucking Panteras and shit.
Like that like 90s thrash, like the what like Carcass level.
Yeah,
like I'm just going for something.
Started like I was like, okay, like I know these bands and I want to kind of like once I got to the point where I could start like old enough that I could understand like buying CDs and shit like that and like digging into things, and I started watching like Beavis and Butthead when it was airing, and that was probably my first like real like kind of experience with GWAR was like anytime like they would show up on Beavis and Butthead.
Right.
And then my best friend in junior high had I think Ragnarok, the CD for like was probably like the first CD of theirs I heard. And I remember being like, oh, like I know this band from like Beavis and Butthead, and like just kind of general watching MTV and shit. And I remember borrowing it and be like, this fucking rocks. Like the one thing I remember being really obsessed with is like the CD booklet for that had like the lyrics, but then stories and like fake news articles or whatever in it about like the oncoming destruction of the planet and like GWAR mythos and shit. And as like a fucking lifelong comic book reader up to that point, that kind of shit also caught my attention because I was like, oh, there's like a backstory to this band and like other shit I could dig into. And this was like early internet days where like that kind of shit wasn't easily available yet. And so it kind of just like lit this fucking thing in my head. I was like, oh, this is like fascinating. This is like intertwining like metal and like comics and like horror movies and like all of this shit I was getting into. And it was just like kind of like this thing that I just became like obsessed with for a little bit and then like fell off because like after Ragnarok I think is Carnival of Chaos and then We Kill Everything, which are like two extremely cheesy barely metal albums. Like that's when they like in the documentary they talk about it, they're like, we weren't specifically a metal band, we were a band that could do whatever we wanted to do music wise and shit. And they were like one of them's got like a weird twangy country song. Like We Kill Everything is very much more like poppy punk than, and like still a little bit of metal in it, but like it's just, I don't know, they had this weird period in the middle where they weren't doing the kind of Scumdogs of the Universe through Ragnarok like fun metal shit they were doing.
Yeah, well, it seemed, I remember that they I just want to preface, like, I am by no means like a GWAR like aficionado.
Yeah,
I'm a very like as I said, cursory fan. However, I have seen them, and we'll get to that eventually. But I remember being kind of surprised by, like, because to me, like, when I saw them, I was just like, this is metal. This is death metal. Like, this is the most metal thing I have ever seen, and up until that point in my life, you know. But I remember in the documentary being surprised by how much of it was really focused on, like, these strange, like, TV specials and like all this kind of like funny, like weird 90s like gross out and strange humor, which like that kind of surprised me because like up until that point I just assumed like, oh, they just made a bunch of albums and if there was like a music video or like this, that, or the other thing there, you know, it was just like extra shit that they made. And it was like, oh no, they wanted to be like this weird, like, I don't even know what to call it, like original programming, like mini conglomerate almost. Like it was, or like this weird like multi-medium project, and like it is that for what it's worth. But I remember being surprised by that, and also like you're saying, like how it was almost like they were like a joke band, like they were jokingly doing all this stuff, like it was played for kicks, and then they're like, why don't we actually play some fucking metal? And that's probably what I'm more familiar with after I saw them, because that's all I remember. I just remember it being like metal.
Right. Yeah, like it's really interesting if like you like going through like a full kind of like a discography listen. It's interesting because it is like that first album they talk about, that the one that like it's Hello, where it's like essentially it's like a punk album, and that's the one they were like, wow, this sounds like shit. Like and then they do Scumdogs of the Universe after that, where they were like, okay, well, why don't we we'll have like real musicians, we'll take this seriously, and we'll see what we could do. And it's very much like a punk band playing metal, if that makes sense. Like it's a bunch of kids that aren't really familiar with metal outside of kind of maybe cursory knowledge playing a metal album. And it's really interesting. Yeah. And it's like,
that's just what stoner metal is.
Yeah. And like that is kind of like a through line through like their first 4 or 5 records through like Ragnarok. And like, you know, there's kind of things they would like, you know, stuff that like, because each album is a concept album, like there are things in it where like Ragnarok has an album where like Sleazy P. Martini, their fucking manager, like raps on it.
Oh my god!
Because it came out in like the early '90s, so there had to be like a rap spoof, and they would do shit like that. That would like that would be part of the fucking concept of the story that needed like it to have a different musical take to it.
Yeah, they're like gross Rush. Like Rush was like, oh, we have to sound like grunge, even though we still sound like Rush, so it sounds really fucking weird.
Especially with like the album This Toilet Earth is the one that they talk about. They did the Skullhead Face movie for, where they're like, all right, we got a Grammy nomination before, we're gonna like actually try this time. And like the album music ties in with the movie, so there's shit where like there's a song Skullhead Face sings that's all like, it's not opera, but it's got like a very like classical feel to it, except for like a part where like heavy metal guitars show up and shit. So there's like weird things they would do like that, but they hit this period after Ragnarok for like 2 albums where they just kind of like fell apart in like what their concept was, and kind of musically they were doing really like weird and not great stuff. And that was the one thing in the documentary that I was kind of bummed about, is like the documentary runs a little under 2 hours, and like rightfully so, there's a lot of shit about like the origins of the band. Yeah, but it's like
because it's kind of convoluted. Yeah. It's not convoluted. It's just, it's not your typical origin for it, and it's strange in what it is, and yet it's like it's so unique to to them, and what it's really like hard to describe like exactly like what a good term is for it, because essentially it was like guy wanted to start a band, guy wanted to create a horror movie, and guy decided that, oh, horror movie band, we're gonna do that and we'll do the music, and it just turned into like this completely other thing that I still feel is super original in terms of like a shock rock performance. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it's wild. Like
it's a basically like a traveling movie set. That's essentially what it is.
It's things that like after them other people have tried to do and couldn't make work. And like they're still like it's interesting seeing it now, especially after the documentary. And I'd heard like Dave Brocky in interviews talk all the time about like, oh, like, you know, I want GWAR to be a band that never dies. Like we could literally just breed more people to go into the suits and like keep playing this stuff. And like it's very fascinating watching it now after especially Dave Brocky died to see that kind of happening where like people, there's just new characters taking up the mantle of, like, you know, they say in the movie that if you were playing that character and you die playing that character dies too. Like we're not putting someone else in that suit.
Well, I mean that like that was something that I mean outside of Dave Brocky obviously, but like that was something that I didn't really realize was how many people that were in the band passed away, and like how just tragic some of them.
Yeah, the Corey one where he just
is like, that the one who had the aneurysm?
Yeah, he had like on the bus, like as they were crossing into Canada. Like, yeah, the one thing I was gonna say real quick is like the one thing that I think like I fucking love this documentary. Just like starting out, like I think it was really great, and like the one thing that kept it from hitting like a 5-star for me, I think I rated a 4.5, is that I wish it was longer, because the one period of this band that I was fucking fascinated about that I wish they spent more time on was that weird middle period kind of lull they had before the one dude is like, okay, like if this band's falling apart, why don't we do one straight up real metal album that they do that kind of reinvigorates their career. And like the first hour of the almost 2 hours of this is like the first like 3 albums in their origin, and I was kind of like, okay, and then they just blast through every other album after that, and I was like, I got like this is one of those documentaries that I wish was like the ones that Shudder does with those horror ones that are like 4 hours long. Like I could have watched this for like 4 hours of just
yeah,
like I don't know, like I'm really
or do like a
episodic or whatever, yeah. Because, like, I could have listened to those dudes talk about the makings of each album for, like, and, like, that period and what it was like touring those albums, like, forever. Especially, like, Mike Dirks seems like the fucking nicest dude on the planet. And, like, everything with him in this, especially when you get towards the end where he's just, like, talking about having to miss shows for like the first times ever because he got like diagnosed with whatever kind of cancer he had for a little bit.
Oh my god, that was so brutal. Like I watched it with Sarah, and she just is like, I was not prepared for how many emotional middle-aged men were going to be in this movie.
I think I'd messaged you when I was like, I want to do this episode, like, if you're around, blah, blah. I was like, I can't believe how many times I, like, teared up watching this fucking movie about a band dressed up as fucking space monsters with giant fucking fish for dicks and shit. Like,
yeah, I know, it's ridiculous.
Like, the fucking, that whole part, like, everything with Dirks, like, their guitar player, is fascinating. Him and the drummer Brad just seem just like fucking genuinely nice dudes that are just like, we like playing music together and it's rad we're still doing it, and like all of this bad shit happened but all this good shit happened too. And it's like, I don't know, it's just really interesting listening to those two especially talk about the band, because they've been in it since basically the beginning, once they kind of became like a serious band. And especially when they get to talking about the old guitar player Pete getting shot, and like Dirks,
that part was fucking mind-blowing.
It's fucked up. And like the shit where they talk, like talking, or any of the times like Dirks is talking about it, where he's like the guy that stayed when everyone else scattered, when a bunch of dudes like showed up after Pete had been shot.
Oh, wasn't it just? And it's just like a bunch of undercover cops, right?
Yeah, like so, like something happens where I think I don't fully understand the story. Like I don't know if they got shot by someone else. Or
I believe
these...
it was they got shot by somebody else who was like accosting them or something like that. Like they were drunk. I don't remember exactly that. I just remember they did that, and then like they were driving because they were like trying to get this dude to the hospital, and he's like bleeding out in the back. And then it turned out that they were being chased by this other car, and it was a bunch of people with guns, and they thought that they were the people that, you know, committed said crime. And then they were like, oh, we're actually a bunch of undercover cops. And they're just like, are you fucking serious?
And it's just so interesting. Like that whole, it's like, that
whole... I didn't know anything about that. You know, like you talk about like weird, you know, crazy shit that's happened in metal. And, you know, maybe it's just because I'm not like the biggest GWAR fan, but that was mind blowing. I could not believe that. That was insane. That's like one of those stories that like will live on forever. Is like, holy shit, that is one of the most out of control experiences probably people have gone through in their entire life. And just to hear it even like secondhand is wild.
Yeah, like hearing
because it's fucking GWAR, like you said.
Hearing I think his name's Mike Bishop, the guy that was Beefcake and is now like Blothar, their singer, like talk about, he was like, you know, I got to a point where he's like, I wasn't even worried about Pete anymore. Like he was in the hospital, he's getting dealt with, but he was like looking at like Dirks, like he was fucked up because he stayed, and he was just like, if Pete's gonna die by getting shot, I'm going to die with him. I'm not gonna leave him here to die alone. And he waited for these guys to pull up and just shoot them. And it's so fucked up listening to him tell that story of like waiting essentially to just sit there and like die with his other guitar player. Like it's fucking brutal. Like it's just so interesting listening to tell these stories that had like nothing to do with anything inside the band. Like it was not music related. It wasn't like really, well, it kind of ends up being it when they're like, Bishop's like, yeah, and then the next day after like Pete was shot, they were just like, you know, you have to come shoot this fucking picture for the album cover. Like, sorry, like shit happens, but this is a fucking thing, and you got to come do this. We already paid money for it. Is like pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that's it. I think they did a good job of kind of showing that, like, while, you know, of course Dave Brockie was like a very animated and very forward and, you know, larger than life personality, and everybody liked him. He was like one of those people that, like, you know, he was bolt thrower in human form. Just everybody likes him. And, you know, when it gets into that like inner politics of the band working and like the inner turmoil, and especially that Brockie like just co-opted Hunter. It's Hunter, right? He was the guy. Yeah, like basically all of his ideas, and he like wanted to make movies and make comic books. He didn't want to be this like weird touring musician thing. Like, I appreciated that there was like shown the different sides, and like that it certainly was not an easy thing to be in GWAR. I mean, I'm like looking at the Wikipedia page right now, and I don't even think they talked to some of the people that are listed here, because there's just been so many fucking people in the band over the years. But I liked that they showed sort of the two sides to it, and that like even when they approach hit the Dave Brockie dying, you get a lot of mixed emotions about it. You know, you get the people who were like, I was devastated, he was my best friend. You get people who were like, we had a rocky friendship, but it's an important part of my life, and I feel like I have to be here. And then you get somebody like Hunter who's just like, I didn't go.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Like,
he's
like, I'm sorry. He's like, I'm
up.
sorry it happened, but I don't know. I kind of got it.
Oh no, yeah,
like, you know what I mean?
I don't begrudge him his feelings, but it's just one of those things where it's so fucked up to be like hearing him just be like, I don't know, I wasn't gonna go to the interview or the funeral because like I don't know what I was gonna say. Like, I fucking hated that guy, and like I'm sad he's dead, but fuck him. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, you don't really see a lot of people like that be so forward about how they
Yeah.
feel about things. And like, I understand he's like back with the band and doing stuff, but like, and I don't know if that's him just like coming to terms with what GWAR is or whatever. I don't know, but I did like that aspect of it. I agree with you. I definitely think they kind of jumped over the like just like making the metal albums part and whatnot. And I don't know if they just assumed that like people would think that was not interesting because it was just going to be them talking about like actually making metal. And I'm sure you can just go on YouTube and watch interviews with them, which are probably just as ridiculous.
Well, that's the thing that kind of bummed me out is like, oh, like they blur past once the dude's like, oh yeah, why don't we just try to do like a real actual metal album and we'll see what happens. And like they fucking they don't talk about any of those albums like at all. It's just all the shit that happened like outside of those albums. So yeah, they had an album called Beyond Hell that was like their kind of real kind of heavy metal period, that was this concept about all of like the world's governments banding together to stop GWAR, and they like blow up their fortress and GWAR has to like retreat into hell to like, I don't know, find themselves and defeat fucking Satan and get back to Earth. It's just like, it's one of the albums that I think they do as a concept album that works the best as a story. And it's the one, like, they don't fucking talk about it at all. They show the album cover, and then they're like, yeah, they did the Sounds of Underground tour. All right, next album. And I was kind of like, okay, well, that sucks, because I fucking wanted to hear about that. And it's the one that I always wish they would have went back to making movies about their albums for, because I think the storyline in it would make a fucking really cool, like, B-horror movie that I think they could have pulled off really well with enough money, but like they just never did.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of like it kind of feels like Brendan Small took that idea and was like, well, I'm just going to make this into a cartoon and call it Metalocalypse. Like that's kind of like, without GWAR, you're not going to have Metalocalypse.
Oh, 100%.
Because I feel like kind of the what it sounds like to me, I should listen to this fucking album. It sounds like to me at this point they're like, yeah, we're fully aware that we're sort of lampooning heavy metal, but we also are pretty good at it because we are self-aware of what this is, so they can make something like this. I think that's why like something like Death Clock works, because it's very like self-aware of like making fun of all the ridiculousness of heavy metal and all of its like subgenres and whatnot. And that's why like somehow it has that mass appeal, even though it's still like, I don't know, pretty like kind of culty to some degree. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that I don't know. That whole period of that band is really fascinating. It's like the one aspect that I wish they had focused like some more time on. Like add another fucking 30 minutes to this to get. But it also seems like one of those things where like they were also probably just in a period where they're like, all right, write, tour, record, or you know,
right,
whatever. So maybe there wasn't a lot of story about it, but I don't know. That's just I feel like that's one of those things that like even if you go on like Wikipedia, like there's not a super detailed amount of information about, and it was the one I was kind of hoping there would be more of, because like you could read on Wikipedia like all about a lot of the shit that happened early on. But also in the documentary, I was fucking amazed by how much fucking footage they had of shit like in those early days. It's wild. Even like before they made an album, like there's so much footage of stuff that I was like, I guess it makes sense that if Hunter Jackson wanted to make a movie, he would like have a camera and shit, and if it's like this big town full of artists, like other people would too. But I don't know, I didn't realize how much footage that they had of just pre Scumdogs of the Universe stuff.
Yeah, and I, you know, not to sound like weird or anything, but like it was also, I think, very, I don't know why it would sound weird, but like I think it was very valuable to hear like the honest opinions of the women who were in the band too, because I really liked them. They were really funny, but also very forthright about what it was like to be a woman on tour and shit, you know, in this like weird fucking band doing very strange things.
Yeah. I was always like really fascinated by, I know her name's Danielle. I can't remember her name, but
Danielle Stamp, who played
Menstra
Hyman.
I knew it was something with an S, and I wanted to say Steele, and I was like, wait, no, that's the author. She always seemed like a really interesting character, and I know probably around the time that they were like actually ending filming for the documentary, because you see her back in the band after like she's at the GWAR BQ thing where they like fucking Viking funeral Odorous' costume and all that shit, and like she had been out of the band for I don't know over a decade before Dave Brockie died, and it was interesting seeing her getting ready to, I assume they getting ready to tour, for they did this tour and like released a live album of just a Scumdogs of the Universe like 30th anniversary whatever tour where they just played like the album, but like they didn't play it like back to back like most bands do, where they just play the full album. They just did a tour where they played just those songs and maybe one or two other ones, but like out of order. And that was where like I think Hunter came back in as Techno Destructo, and it was kind of interesting because I think it was only for like that one tour, but it was interesting to see them back in those characters after fucking God knows how many years of not being in the band. Because I know after Brockie died, they did, Mike Bishop comes back and he takes over as singer, and they brought in Kim Dial, D-Y.
Like Kim Dilla?
Yeah,
Not Dylan, not me.
Kim Dylan Gonzalez in the band. Like, I remember them announcing her as being, she was going to be, like, a co-singer with Bishop.
I remember. That was, like, big news.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that fucking rocks. That's an interesting take. Like, if you're going to, like, try to replace Dave Brockie, like, going, like, outside of the box seems really interesting. And then I think she just could not deal with those dudes in that band and, like, quit or got fired. And then, that's just been just kind of those dudes rolling forward since then. So I don't know, they've tried, and it just seems like a bunch of dudes that I can't imagine what it's like to be in that band as like a new person, exactly. Like just jumping into that dynamic at all.
Yeah, and especially when like you are being led around by somebody like Dave Brockie, who's basically just he's just on 24/7, and they said like there were points where it like clearly was like it got to him, like the touring and everything. It was just starting to like, I don't even know, like rot his mind. Like I don't. It just sounded like it was grueling to him after a while. Like he just couldn't keep up, and then finally, like I assume like why he overdosed was he was trying to stay, like he was just trying to like numb it off, and that unfortunately that's what happened. It was like, I remember it like sent shockwaves, because I remember that was in 2014, so I was out of college, so like I definitely had like a much deeper knowledge of like the world of heavy metal and stuff, and like I just remember like every fucking website was just like, Dave Brockie died, and everybody was fucking bummed out, everybody was posting pictures and everything, and I was just like, damn, that sucks. I'm pretty happy that I actually got to see them with Brockie still in the band, which, I've missed out on some bands because of, people moving, like, passing on. So I'm pretty happy that I got to see GWAR at fucking Bamboozle Fest in the Meadowlands, New Jersey. That's not a town. That's just what it's called, Meadowlands, New Jersey, in the parking lot of the arena over there. And, just saw a whole bunch of other pop punk bands that I definitely do not fucking like anymore. And GWAR got onto that bill somehow. And it was fucking awesome. And I loved it. It was a great show. I couldn't tell you what songs they played, but I can tell you that I believe they brought Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama out. Yeah. And, they obviously both died very graphic deaths. And but my favorite part was probably when Odorous brought out a huge smoking, like, prop gray rock that just said crack on it in big letters. And he goes, in his voice, like, the only reason we ever came to New Jersey was because of your top quality crack. And, like, keep in mind, most of the people here were, like, probably 14 to, like, 18 and didn't even know who GWAR was. So I get covered in the fake blood and everything, and I got back to my car, and when my friends got in, the car lights came on. My friend Andrew shrieked and asked me what happened to me. So they were probably watching some fucking shitty pop punk band that I don't like anymore.
I'll get back to it because I want to talk about, like, I saw them twice, and one of them was really interesting. But the thing I always really appreciated about them is, like, if you listen especially to some of their older albums, there's some, like, language and shit used in them that, like, you know, in 2022 you're like, oh boy. But, like, they were really big, especially in those early days of, like, oh, like, the PMRC is going to come after us. We're going to make the most, like, offensive, like, here's a song about how I kidnap and fuck your kids kind of thing. Like, I'll kidnap and kill your kid and then fuck them and shit like that. And I'm just like, I appreciate a band that's willing to be like they talk about the whole thing with, like, Metal Blade making the deal with fucking Time Warner.
Oh, yeah,
and losing that deal because they backed Dave Brockie and, like, the rest of GWAR. They all came to the decision. They're like, we're not taking this song off the album. And, like, Brian Siegel?
Brian Slagle.
Yeah. Was just like, you know, like, if I sign a band, they can, like, I'm not here to tell them what to sing about, whatever. And, like, I will back those bands. And, like, yeah, we lost a fuck ton of money in a big kind of, like, you know, distribution route we wouldn't have had, you know, we didn't have prior and all that shit, like, because, like, they should be allowed to do what they want. It's their art, and I'm not here to, like, get in the way. All over a fucking minute-long song called Baby Dick Fuck.
Well, I think the thing about GWAR was that their intention was not to, like, you know, go out and you know, maybe alienate, like, you know, Squares and fucking people like Tipper Gore, sure, but, like, they were not out there to alienate people that would be interested in, like, what they were doing, but they were also, and so in that regard, they were like, they're not, like, the worst people, I guess. You know, they weren't, like, murdering fans or, like, killing each other, or, I mean, obviously they went through their own struggles and everything, but, like, a lot of, like, what people were reacting to was just, like, shock and image and sort of like this. And, like, yeah, I'm sure they were, like, fucking crazy people on tour. Like, I'm not disputing that. Every fucking metal band from that era certainly, like, probably was, and before, and probably after. But, but, like, it's, you know, they weren't burning down churches. You know, they weren't doing that. They were showing up at venues, playing a show, covering the audience in blood, packing it up, and going on. Like, they talk about that. It was a grind. It was a production. It was a show. So I think, like, in that regard, it's like, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not saying that, like, you know, it's, like, appropriate or anything like that. But I do think that it's mostly played for, like, shock and awe and jest, and not, like, they're not going around being like, all right, now that I'm clocked out of GWAR, time to go join my, you know, local hate group and you know, rough up some hooligans in town or something like that. It's like, no, I'm sure when they go home, they're like, a bed and a couch, I can fall asleep on either thing right now and nobody will bother me.
Well, it's also one of those things too that, like, they were, like, I know, like, real early on, like, they would kill, like, neo-Nazi characters on stage all the time and shit. And, like, they were blatantly, like, good dudes with, like, pretty good politics that were just kind of like, okay, well, you're telling us we can't do this thing, like, obviously we're gonna do this thing.
Yeah, they didn't double down and be like, you know what, we're gonna introduce, like, an Adolf Hitler spoof that's gonna tour around with us and we're gonna be super controversial. They're like, no, we'll just kill him every fucking night because why not? He was a horrible person. He obviously deserves to die.
Yeah, it's always fun. Like, so to jump back a little bit to seeing them live, I only saw them twice, and it was after Dave died, because, like, the only times they ever played in Ohio, they always played at a venue I fucking hated, and I was like, I'm not going, I'll catch them at some other time. It's just one of those things I kept being, I'll catch them later. And Dave Brockie died, and I was like, okay, well, this feels like they're doing this tour kind of honoring Dave Brockie. I was like, I should go. So I finally went, and, like, that show, it was fine. It was kind of like, you could tell they were still sort of like, I don't know what we're doing moving forward. This is kind of this weird intermediate, like, thing. They didn't have, I don't think they'd even like recorded anything with Mike Bishop back in the band as like their new singer. So it was kind of strange, but like, and like it was still good. Like it was a GWAR show. Like, you know, you're there watching them kill a giant fucking dinosaur and shit. But they came back a couple years later after I think they recorded their first album with Mike Bishop, and they played a haunted house in Ohio.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was fucking sick. So there's I can't remember the name of this place, but it's this place that had like, when you enter it, you go through the front gates, there's this big kind of town square type area with like a bunch of different haunted houses attached to it that you could go into. And then they had one of those like, you know, the haunted hayride type shit you could go on. Like, this is a big fucking, like, you know, Halloween fucking thing you go and, like, hang out at. There was, like, restaurants in this fake town square thing they had. Like, it's this really cool place, and I can't remember the name of it. But they had a big stage, because I remember the week after GWAR, Bone Thugs and Harmony was playing there. It was very weird. So they would put on shows, but GWAR was playing. I was like, GWAR's playing at this haunted house. It's like, I have to go. Like, there's no way I'm missing whatever the fuck that's going to be like. And it was... Trump was in office. It had to have been maybe a year or two before I moved here to New Jersey. But I know Trump was in office, and they killed Trump, and I remember the crowd in Ohio being like, wait, what? I thought you just killed, like, Obama and Hillary on stage and shit. And I was
it's like, dude, they've been killing every president since they've been a band. Like,
you could tell a big portion of the crowd was, like, just people that were like, oh, this show at, like, this haunted house, and I know who GWAR is. They're that, like, weird band. I'll go see them. And then it was, like, the haunted houses were, like, open while it was happening. So, like, families were just coming in.
Oh, that's awesome.
And, like, GWAR's just playing and, like, all this shit. And I was like, this is fucking fascinating. Like, half the time I was just people watching coming through the door more than the actual show. Just watching, like, families walk in and be like, what the fuck is going on here?
That's like this weekend is like fucking Psycho Las Vegas, so I just assume everybody walking around that wherever it is now, like that new insane, is just like, wait a minute, this place is already like fucking insane. Why are all these fucking weird people and noisy bands playing? Like, it's that kind of vibe. That's really fucking funny. Except the GWAR one makes more sense.
Yeah. My favorite last year, Psycho Las Vegas, happened at the same casino that
they did it the year before too, where that like horrible shooting was.
Oh, was it? I just know that last year it was held in the same casino that a WWE pay-per-view was happening that weekend.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I can't fucking imagine what this crowd is like there. There's something else that I was gonna bring up before fucking Skype died, and now I don't remember what it was. So I'm guessing since you've said you were like you know definitely haven't listened to all of their albums. Have you seen any of the movies they made?
No, but like seeing what the little footage on there, it kind of like, if I'm being honest, it sort of gave me like OG Power Rangers vibes, but like
a little bit. But
also, the fact that like Alex Winter was in the documentary, I'm like, okay, this definitely fits in with that, Idiot Box series, and like it totally fit in with that early weird 90s period that I don't know, I don't feel like people don't talk about it that much, but that very specifically, like, kind of trying to be mainstream, but like they couldn't really do it, so it kind of plays a lot better now, just like, and it's not what people think of when they think of the 90s at all. They think of completely different things. So I haven't, but I mean, I would be interested in seeing them just for like kicks. I'm sure they're just ridiculous and entertaining.
They're strange.
Somehow I knew that's what you were going to say.
Because like some of them will just be like, some of them are just straight up like live concerts they filmed. So you get like that whole storyline. But then there's ones where it'll be like a live concert where like you'll hear all of the in between song shit, but then it'll like when they're playing the song live, they just overdub the fucking recorded version over it. And you're just kind of like, what the fuck is this? But like Phallus in Wonderland and then Skullhead Face, I think they made one for Ragnarok too. And then It's Sleazy are all supposed to be like quote unquote like real movies. And they're so fucking weird. Like They're definitely worth seeing once, and maybe that's it. Although I have a real love of Skullhead Face, the one that they said that they were like, this is the one we're gonna try on, and blah blah blah, because it's blatantly the one with the best production, but the storyline makes like zero sense. But they also have like Jello Biafra as like a corporate executive in it, which is pretty funny.
Didn't he put out like their early stuff?
He may have done like pressings of something, but I think
on Alternative Tentacles.
I think they were pretty much just a Metal Blade band for
most of their career.
Decades, until probably like the last handful of albums. I think they jumped to like something else. But yeah, I know, like, I think they just became friends with Jello after all of the sort of PMRC and Dave Brocky getting arrested for having a fucking fake cuttlefish as a dick on stage and shit.
I love that they were like, that thing is still in lockup somewhere in a police department.
You know that shit is propped up somewhere as like a trophy in that police department.
We need to liberate that thing.
It's so funny. Like, I like the little like comic book things they do to like tell some of the like backstories in the documentary, and that one especially of the two cops each holding the bucket with just like the cuttlefish fucking hanging out of it.
Yeah, so maybe like a not great part of my like youth, but like, hey, we all make mistakes. When I was young in middle school, I used to listen to Opie and Anthony on 92.3 before it switched over to radio, and then it was just like talk bullshit or whatever. And I remember one time they interviewed Dave Brocky, and he comes in as Odorous, and they're just like, look at this fucking guy! And he's like talking about his fucking cuttlefish dick, and he's like, no, let me explain to it. And they're just like, even they were like kind of not prepared for how in character this person was. And that's those two fuckheads.
Yeah. I think the only good interview they ever did on one of those is that Joan Rivers one. Which is interesting.
It sucks that he sucks too, but like I do remember like they had Louis on and they were talking to Donald Rumsfeld and asked him if he was a lizard person, and he wouldn't actually like say yes or no, and you just hear one of them be like, he's a lizard. Like, that was pretty funny. Obviously, fuck Louis.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, we don't need to dwell on fucking Opie and Anthony anymore.
I honestly don't know if I've ever heard I don't know if I could tell you I've ever heard their voices, let alone, like, a full show. I know they're people that existed, like, I guess they still have a radio show?
No, like, two of them, like, well, you probably know who Jimmy Norton is. He was in, like, a couple of the Kevin Smith movies, I think. And, like, him and Opie do a thing, and Anthony is just like a fucking horrible, like, right-wing piece of fucking shit who does his own show, but he's just an extra large piece of shit. Let's put it that way. He's just one of those guys who's like, my sole existence is to be like a giant piece of shit.
There's this whole like world of those kind of like radio people that I just have no context for, because I feel like I always equate Opie and Andy, like the name Opie and Anthony, with like Don Imus and shit for some reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's that whole period.
I'm like, I don't know if I could tell you what any of them do except say terrible things.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're exactly correct. So it's. Ugh.
Yeah, I don't know. I know you said you had like some notes from watching it. Do you have anything else in this is GWAR that you wanted to bring up?
Not really. I mean, I would definitely say, like, watch it, regardless if you know anything about the band or not, because, like I said, they're just one of those bands that already is interesting enough, and they have, like, even this more very, like, crazy in-depth backstory. We probably didn't even, like, touch on a lot of the stuff that they approach in the film and touch on. So I really liked it. Like you said, could I have watched more? Yeah, because it was just that interesting. And I think me being like a non-fan really helped me appreciate it more, because I wasn't like, oh, I've been waiting for years to see all the things I already know about the band, like now just put on, like I didn't really know as much, and I haven't like, I'm sure I read about them like on Wikipedia one time, like years ago. But to me, it was really, really like insightful, and I thought they did a really good job with it. And yeah, I would say just watch it. I did think it was really weird though that like on Shudder, and I'm sure they just did this for the name recognition, that Bam Margera was listed very high, and he's in the movie for like maybe 20 seconds.
If you go to Letterboxd, the entire cast listing is just all of the people outside of GWAR. So like Alex Winter, Tom Stern,
Yeah.
Thomas Lennon, like also hero of this movie, Tom Lennon's dog.
Oh yeah.
Pass the fuck out the entire time he's doing the
Yep.
interview.
Yep, but you can't put him down.
Oh, well, I remember there was one other thing I was going to bring up because we were talking about. Oh, fuck, I don't remember how we got into it. I think it was one of the things we were talking about, like Dave Brockie just kind of losing his mind. But they tell this story about they're all at like the slave pit headquarters, and he just comes in with just like this crew of people no one knows, takes this bottle of some fan sent them liquid acid and just squirts half of it into his eye, and it's gone for 3 days.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, I feel like that would probably help you slowly lose your shit.
Yeah, I don't. They didn't, and probably for clear reasons, they didn't delve too hard into some of the like madness that probably went down while on tour. But that was definitely a fine little insight into it, and sort of explains a lot of probably like what went down. And I don't know. It's to me like one last thing about it is that I think one of the most interesting things about GWAR is that it has like the same level of like drama sort of associated with it as like a corporately owned like property where like I don't know. I'll just use it as an easy example where like well maybe not that one but. Or like TMNT. Let's go with TMNT. Like that TMNT is corporately owned at this point, right? So and it started out as like an indie thing, and you see how like the dissolution between Peter Laird and I forget the other guy's name. Fuck, what is his name?
Oh no, it's like right there on the tip of my tongue because I always hear it as like Laird and something.
Yeah, and he was married to whoever did the voice of the main woman in Heavy Metal 2000. Was it Julie Strain? Maybe? I don't know.
Oh, was he? I don't think I knew that. I'll look it up real quick while you're... Kevin
Eastman.
Eastman and Laird. Eastman and Laird.
Yeah, Eastman and Laird. Yeah, so it's kind of like how like it's like they had like their dissolution and that like kind of had like the falling out. Or like even if you look at like it's not as dramatic, but like something like Star Wars and how much like weird, stupid drama is associated with that, with like the originals and the new era and whatever. But like GWAR is just like its own operating kind of like entity, and I thought it was just interesting to see how the dynamics of I wanted this to be a show and a band, and I want this to be like a show and a multimedia thing, and then Dave Brockie just was like, that's a good idea, and just kind of took all of it from Hunter, but Hunter was like, I want to just do this, and you just took my idea. I didn't even know who the fuck you were until you showed up, basically. It's so weird how like that happened, and it's just like this bizarre tale that went down. It's really, really interesting to see how GWAR was this strange, independently operated beast that still felt like it had strange corporate backing and odd drama associated, but it really didn't. It wasn't going through those same problems that like a tumultuous studio production or studio interference creates. It was literally just like a fucking madhouse to work in. It was just crazy.
Well, it's like you hear bands that have like 4 people talk about how fucking difficult it is to make decisions in the band. Yeah. And then you think about they had like the 5 or 6 people on stage as the band. You have Hunter and Don backstage. You have 2 or 3 people also in the band that do like the slave pit characters. Then the rest of the people they consider to be as part of the band that would be back in Richmond, like making costumes and all of that shit. Like I can't fathom what a band meeting with like 19 fucking people and it is like trying to make any decisions. And someone in the documentary, I can't remember who, I feel like it was maybe the drummer, talks about like Hunter was just like, like, yeah, I just wanted to make my movie, I wanted to do comic books and just do like just this kind of like weird shit I wanted to do. And Dave Brockie was like, no, we're gonna be like punk Disney.
Yeah.
Which is such a fucking weird thing to hear. Especially now that I know that, like, literally you can go to their website and buy GWAR Bitcoin.
Oh my god.
Which
they better cash it in.
I feel like is something Dave... I don't know. I'm torn on whether Dave Brockie would be like, fuck this, or be like, oh, yeah, fuck it, whatever.
I'm sure he would just be like, do whatever.
I'd be really interested in, like, just to know, like, what his opinion on Bitcoin would be.
Just like work it into like the fucking mythos somehow.
Right.
The other thing about GWAR that I think is interesting is that, like, I think a kind of comparable band to them, and I'm sure they've toured together, would be like the Misfits, because they're like the other like giant horror touring engine. And it's like kind of funny how I feel like GWAR is just like, I think it's just because they're so much more committed to the bit. Like, that's the part about GWAR that I think is like, that has been consistent over the years, is that they've been committed to the bit. And I can really appreciate that, as opposed to like seeing just like so many iterations of like what the Misfits like once were, and just like random fucking people that are like, oh, we had this drummer and for a week, and then we got another drummer. Actually, now it's another drummer, and so-and-so's in the band again, and blah, blah, blah. And now they're like, oh man, it's like, that's what I feel like. Plus, like, the merch output from the Misfits obviously is like fucking legendarily obnoxious.
Yeah.
Like, just slap that logo on fucking anything. And yet, I'm sure like GWAR put out better merch and put on a more worthwhile show. Because, like, I don't know, I saw the Misfits and they didn't like do anything crazy. They just had big stupid pumpkins on their stage. They had a fucking third guitar player. Why?
I refuse
second guitar player.
to acknowledge any Misfits like the Misfits even being a thing anymore. In my mind, they died in like the 90s. Like, everyone I know is so fucking stoked anytime they announce a show, and I'm like, you all tell me they sound good, but I refuse to believe they sound good. Because
it sounds good because you have a gajillion other people singing along to all of the songs, because they're only like 5 lyrics. That's why it sounds good.
Well, my thing is, like, I fucking loved the Misfits. Like, my first tattoo was fucking like every other dumb punk hardcore kid was either a Misfits tattoo or a Black Flag tattoo. I got the Misfits tattoo. And, like, I've heard Danzig live over the last fucking 15 years. He doesn't sound good.
No, he doesn't sound
I can't imagine he sounds good like playing Misfits, but he can't sound good doing Danzig shit. Like, in my mind, I can't compute it. And I fucking hate Jerry Only, and I refuse to give him money.
Well, like, I think I've definitely said it at some point, but like, I got the sweet deal where like Megadeth canceled at Psycho Las Vegas and the Misfits were announced as an addition. And I'm like, great. I'm not paying anything else to see this band. This is perfect. This is ideal. This is achieving like my New Jersey Chekhov moment. Like, not like Chekhov's gun, but like you're crossing off that thing that like I hadn't done. I get to be like, yes, I finally saw the fucking Misfits. No, it was not the best. Like, he sounded good for like probably 3 songs, and then the rest was definitely like backing vocals and everyone else singing the songs. And just to say it again, they somehow, and I mean, I know how, with a lot of fucking money, got Dave Lombardo to be their drummer for this. Like, motherfucking Dave Lombardo, like the most talented person in fucking Slayer,
the most
is like
basic
playing
drum beats.
He's like, what? Are you fucking crazy? He's probably like, yes, in a heartbeat.
Oh, I can't imagine the money he made on just those first 2 or 3 reunion shows, and they said that was going to be just it alone. Like, he probably made a year's worth of touring money with Slayer on like those 2 shows alone, and then they were just like, we're gonna keep going. And he's like, all right, I'll play like 5 shows a year with you guys for this fucking paycheck.
It's so funny. And like I love that the Misfits have just been like calling it quits for like the last like 4 years now.
And then they just keep announcing a show every 4 months.
Kit's going is going to see them, right?
They're playing like Misfits and Alice Cooper playing on Halloween in Texas. Which
baffling.
I feel like if I was going to go see them, it would have to be on Halloween. Is the only way. They would have to be playing in fucking New Brunswick on Halloween, and I'd be like, okay, I would maybe go to this. Because it's one of those, like, they're, like, kind of tying it back to GWAR. Everyone in GWAR kind of seems like a nice dude. And everybody in the Misfits that has ever been a part of the Misfits is just a huge piece of shit.
Yeah.
Fucking Danzig, Doyle, Jerrioli, Michael Graves.
Oh my god, fuck Michael Graves. That dude sucks so much.
Yeah, he's a fucking asshole. Which is a bummer, because I liked those albums he did with them. They're, like, not the best, but they're totally fun, and he's a fucking...
Oh, yeah, there's, like, that... There's one song that is off of one of the Michael Graves albums that I really, really like, and I'm like, God, he is such a fucking piece of shit. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, but, like, all of them are.
Yeah. Everybody... I feel like maybe Robo, when he was their drummer, I would be like, yeah, he's probably fine. Like, when they brought in one of the Ramones, they brought in the shittiest Ramones. Like, Marky Ramone to be in their band. They were like, we gotta get this one dude that also hates black people to be in our band. A fucking terrible decision. Fuck the Misfits. Yeah. Go watch This Is GWAR, especially if you have Shudder. Like, even like Dylan said, if you're not a fan, like, the documentary is fascinating enough on its own that you don't have to be a fan, and you may come out of it as a fan of the band. Like, it's really fascinating, just especially, and if only for seeing all of this footage of them prior to, like, actually making albums. It's so weird. But yeah, I really liked it, and I want more people to watch it. I'm hoping that it's getting a bunch of views on Shudder, hopefully. I don't know if that, like, the person that made it has done anything else, but I would be really interested to see if they'd end up being one of those people that only does, like, documentaries or some shit, seeing, like, what they do next.
I mean, I think they did a great job. I don't know what the person's name is.
Scott Barber. Like, on Letterboxd, they don't have any other credits, so I'm assuming it's one of those things where somebody was just like, I want to make this, I love GWAR, and I want to make this documentary.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing about it is, like, it's one of those movies where I feel like if you watch it, it's, you know, we kind of, you know, we're still living in really fucking weird ass times, and it's a movie where I feel like the emotion is very sincere and genuine, and, like, if you kind of need, like, if you need something to, like, sort of tug at your heartstrings and, like, kind of feel good and, like, learn that there's a little bit more to, like, these weird touring heavy metal musicians, it's definitely, like, good for that too.
Yeah,
it's good at showing a lot of different sides to the whole mythos of GWAR. I was like, ethos is not the right word.
Yeah, it's all one of the other things they talk about too that I found really interesting is, like, kind of interesting on a less fun thing, as I think we brought it up earlier, is where they talk about, like, Corey dying, and they're just like,
yeah,
we took one day off and had to be back on stage because we had the band meeting, and we're like, the only way we could help his now, like, widow is to keep touring, so she's making money off this tour. And it was like, it's a fucking bummer, because it's like, we didn't really get time to grieve. We just jumped right back into it the next night, and, like, that was the thing we learned, that when Dave Brocky died a couple years later, was like, you know, we got to talk to each other and, like, not just shut down and grind forward like this band has done for 20-something years.
Yeah, it was refreshing to see somewhat of, not even somewhat, just to see, like, somebody being honest about dealing with grief and sadness, as opposed to just, like, you know, a lot of these, like, aging rocker dudes and metal dudes just being fucking like off-putting for the sake of being off-putting. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It was just like nice to see that, and I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's just them like, you know, being honest people. I don't know if it's them finally, like, it took years for them to get to this place, but I'm like, it's just like nice to see that sort of that human emotion, because so much of heavy metal, and like especially from that era and like kind of shortly before, just seemed to be like so much of it was just like ridiculous and like played up and exaggerated and like, wow, we are the fucking most crazy fucking whatever the fuck it is. And this is just like the most vile, gory, slimy, gooey band you can imagine, and it's a bunch of dudes speaking, like, just spilling their hearts out and being very forthright about how so much of the shit in the history of GWAR just fucked them up for years.
Yeah, it's really funny because it's like you have this band full of dudes pretending to be fucked up, like raping and pillaging, smoking crack space aliens, who are just like, yeah, I just like to go home and just like hang out with my kids afterwards. And then you just have like some band which, like, I don't know what, not to make fun of them because they're fine, but the first band that popped in my head for some reason was like Dying Fetus, where like they go on stage and they're just like, all right, you motherfuckers, I want to see you kill each other out there, and you're just like,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
come on, dude.
Oh, the other thing that I was gonna say, my last thought was, I think it's so fucking funny, and I think I saw them the same Bamboozle was like, I saw GWAR one night, and then I saw like Rise Against the next night, and the dude that was, and I'm like, what a fucking difference in sound. Like,
yeah.
I don't really like that band that much. I mean, they're just so on the nose to me with what they're about.
Sure.
But it was still interesting. It just to see like that, like Rise Against this like super like polished, you know, tight, you know, sort of like, you know, speaking for like the good of the people or whatever, and like identifying with that and making kids feel good when they're at that age. And then like juxtapose that from like where you were playing with like GWAR, which is just like, we're gonna murder these politicians on stage because that's what you really want.
Well, the one thing with that too that really makes sense is like that dude was in the band during that period where they were making weird, like, We Kill Everything has this very strange, like, it's like, I don't want to say pop punk because I know pop punk immediately puts in like people's heads like Blink 182 type sound. But, like, when you listen to it, it's not metal, and it's very much like a punk record with a poppy feel to it, but with that kind of, like, still a little bit of, like, that GWAR metal tinge to it. And, like, it was really interesting seeing that. I was like, okay, that makes sense, that this was one of the guys who was kind of, like, a lead guitar player and writer during this period, because, like, that's what he was coming from. Like, I think he was maybe in the band Zeke or something. I forget what band he said he was in before joining GWAR and then like jumping over to Rise Against.
I like Zeke.
I think so. I forget. He was in some band that was kind of along those lines, like a straight up kind of like, you know,
just like an abrasive hardcore band.
Yeah, or like, you know, one of those bands that like you could say is a pop punk band, but would bring more to mind like a band of along the lines of like Bad Religion kind of thing. Where,
okay,
you know,
okay.
Also, I like Rise Against. How dare you? No. I like old Rise Against. Once they became, like, they got, like, major label kind of super polished, I kind of jump out.
Once they got a song on Guitar Hero.
Their early stuff's really good, though. It's, like, kind of that really fast, like, kind of post-hardcore type stuff.
I'm sure that's none of what they played.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like, at that point, they played, like, maybe their fucking, like, final song was, like, an old song. But,
I don't even remember.
Yeah, go watch This Is GWAR. It's good. Everybody should go give it a chance. If you like horror shit and you're not familiar with GWAR, what are you doing? All right, you want to talk about? I know you said you had some movies you watched recently. That
yeah, a lot of shit. I watched because you did the episode on it. I'm like, you know what? I've never seen Dread, so I was like, I have to check this out. So I don't think I liked it as much as you did, but I'm still glad I watched it because I was fucking like crying listening to that episode. Like, the original one does suck. It's really not good.
It sucks in such like the best 90s action movie way, though.
Yeah. I think the thing with Dread was like I forgot that it was also like this weird 3D movie that got released, and I
Yeah.
think some of the like effects were a little ridiculous. But I was also just like, I don't know, it was definitely still fun. I still enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I watched all of the Jaws sequels because I talked about them on my podcast, which includes Cruel Jaws,
Hell
which
yeah.
is still fucking amazing. I also forgot how insane Jaws the Revenge is. Psychic
It's
Grandma,
I
gotta love
I
it.
I kind of appreciate that it seems like the last couple years Jaws the Revenge is getting this weird kind of resurgence as where most people it used to be people were just like fuck that piece of shit, and now people are like this is baffling. I kind of like this.
Oh, it's like one of my favorite bad movies,
Yeah,
I think. I
it
think it's like
rules.
A plus. Honestly, Jaws 3D is also A plus terrible.
I like all four of those movies. Like
They're all watchable. You can watch all of
yeah,
them.
one is obviously an absolute masterpiece, like perfect movie.
Yes.
Two's probably my least favorite because it's just a very typical sequel. But like three rules because A, it's in a fucking like a theme park basically, you know, a SeaWorld. And it's 3D and all of the 3D is fucking atrocious.
Oh, it's awful. There's so much weird stuff like in it too, well, number one, the fact that Dennis Quaid in it still baffles me. And I read that he was just fucking coked out of his brain
Oh,
like
he
the
looks like it
entire
in that
time.
movie.
And like the fact that his girlfriend is just making out with his brother too, very fucking strange. So yeah, we watched Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I was just like, I don't know. I think I'm just completely out of my comic book movie phase. I thought it was pretty boring. Like I know you liked it.
Well,
I did like the parts where it was like I could tell Sam Raimi made this movie.
there's this thing that like so like that and then we recently went and saw Thor Love and Thunder where I like both that and the Doctor Strange. Like I enjoyed them. I'm not like I can't say I didn't not like them, but like they're definitely they're in this weird period with those movies where it feels like they're not on track with like a through plot, you know? Like they introduce Kang the Conqueror and Loki as like their next big villain who has not shown up in anything since. And like it's just a bunch of weird like you know, like Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi, fucking this Doctor Strange, the Thor movie, like none of it is tied together at all.
No, it's just movies, and it's like
And
just people standing around saying weird, crazy shit.
I know they've said like I think in the Ant-Man movie everything is going to like kind of coalesce into where it's moving. So I'm interested to see that, but it's just like I don't know. I like Doctor Strange. I rewatched it after my horrible movie theater experience with it. And like I do like it. I think they needed another movie or like series in between WandaVision and that to like deal with Wanda becoming bad again because it's so fucking all of a sudden that like I do like that they made her like the bad guy in that movie, but I kind of wish there was more leading to that as opposed to just oh she was reading a book in this post-credit scene, now she's a bad guy.
Yeah, it just was like we need a villain, and
Yeah.
we'll just use her. So, yeah, I personally, I just don't like Doctors. Like, I like Doctor Strange as a comic book character, but I don't like the MCU version. He doesn't click with me at all. I really don't. I'm like, why is he just not British? He can be British.
I don't like him in the first Doctor Strange movie, but I do like that movie because like visually it's very cool. But I like him when he pops up in like Spider-Man No Way Home, or like you know when he's in the Avengers. Like I like him interacting with other characters, but yeah, like when it's like just his movies, I'm kind of like, all right, like can we have more Wong?
Yeah, I do like him. I would prefer just a movie about him.
I love that he's becoming like the Agent Coulson of these movies now, where he's the guy that's popping up in like all of them.
Yeah. So what else? I watched The Street Fighter. That movie fucking rules. Rips that dude's dick off.
The Sonny Chiba, is that who?
Yeah, the Sonny Chiba movie.
Yeah, that movie's good.
I watched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I thought that was a lot of fun.
I still need to watch
watched
that.
I watched The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. That movie is amazing.
It's
Really fucking good.
so good.
Yeah, loved it. We watched Body Bags. That was a lot of fun. We rewatched the Pine Barrens episode of The Sopranos because R.I.P. Paulie Walnuts. I watched Eaten Alive. That movie is fucking insane.
the Toby Hooper one.
Yeah, what a fucking movie that is. It's so weird, but I did like it. I watched 47 Meters Down. I thought it was fine. I watched The Pool. Thought that was also insane, but I did like it a lot.
I like that movie because, like I always say out here, I love a movie where every decision is a bad decision, and that's all that movie is a dude making bad decisions over and over and over again, where things just get worse and worse.
Yeah, I liked it. I watched Death Drop Gorgeous. We were both pretty big fans of that. We really liked it.
Yeah,
a lot
really
like that. Despite it having such a weird, like, independent homemade film vibe, like, there was just so much in it to enjoy, and I'm very interested in. I'm very excited to listen to the episode that you did with. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, it's up on the Patreon. It'll be up.
Oh, okay.
It'll be up like 3 weeks ago when this comes out. So.
Oh, okay. So I'm not in
no,
yeah. So I'm looking forward to listening to that and their new movie coming up. We watched Beyonce Homecoming, which is the Netflix filmed concert of her at Coachella, which is really cool because they show all the production aspects of it. But we just made fun of Jay-Z every time he showed up because it's just he fucked up. I started Primal season 2, which is that animated show about the caveman and the T-Rex, and it rules. It's basically just Conan the Barbarian now. Did you watch Prey?
I haven't yet. I talked about it. I watched all the other Predator movies, and I was like, I gotta stop a Predator for a minute.
I mean, I haven't seen those other 2 movies because they looked like hot garbage, and I have a friend who he saw Predators in the theater and hated it, only to be trumped by how much he hated the Predator.
Yeah.
I don't know what if they've seen Prey, but I thought Prey was really awesome. I haven't watched it with the all Comanche audio yet, but I definitely will before the end of the year. But I really, really fucking liked it. Just fucking finally a good a movie that makes me feel like this is right up with the original. I really liked it.
Yeah,
it fits nicely up with the other 2.
I'm trying to get time to sit down and watch it, but it's one of those things where a bunch of shit I watch is usually at work, and I want to be able to sit down and pay attention to it. So I'll get to it eventually.
We went and saw Nope. I really dug it. I'll be interested to hear what you all think of it when you get around to seeing it. Watched Misery for the first time. That movie's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the only good Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah, such an excellently paced film. Watched Lichen Colony.
Hell,
that movie is incredible.
So good.
Don't need to say anything else about it. We watched the Alan Partridge movie today, which is also really fucking funny. But we also watched It Chapter 1 and 2. And
had you not seen those before?
No.
What'd you think?
I thought the first one, I thought Chapter 1 was pretty not good.
Oh, really?
I thought the second part was fucking terrible. I hated the second part. I thought it was terrible.
I'm ambivalent with the second one. I really like fuck, why does his name just leave my head? Bill Hader in it. And
because he's Bill Hader.
Well, I think they cast it really well outside of the dude that plays Bill. Professor
James
X.
McAvoy is really bad.
He's fine, but it's just I don't know. I think they could have gone with somebody better. But I really like Bill Hader as Richie. I like the dude that plays the guy that Richie is secretly in love with. I can't remember his name. I thought he was good. The guy gets stabbed in the cheek.
Oh yeah, Ziggy from the
Yeah,
Wire.
like
That's what like we were like fucking losing our minds when we were like, it's that guy.
he's really good. And like there's some cool things I think they do in that movie, but like that whole part of that story is so like not good, I think, in the even in like the book and whole story wise. Like I don't really give a shit about that side of the story. So like I don't know, it kind of makes it like once you get into like all the giant spider shit, I'm kind of like, all right, well like I don't care about any of this. Give me the fucking
No,
space turtle.
no, I
I,
I think like one of my biggest problems with it was just like I thought that they were gonna try to like I didn't really have any like knowledge of what it was like the adaptation was gonna be like. I figured, oh, this is really fucking long. I figured they were gonna like put in more stuff from the book. Thankfully, they didn't have the weird child orgy thing that happens.
I remember they teased something like when they were filming it that they were like, "There's a scene that's gonna be like one of the most upsetting scenes you're ever gonna see in a horror movie," and blah blah blah. And I was like, "Oh my god, they're gonna do it!" I was like, "They're gonna put that fucking child orgy in here," and,
Nope.
and instead it was just that they filled a fucking bathroom stall full of blood, and I was like, "Really? Like this is what you teased?"
Yeah, but I didn't like the fact that it to me just felt like they were just remaking the original one, which like I also don't think is perfect by any stretch. I think it's like fine and watchable, and I like Tim Curry, but I just felt like it was more sincere, even though it's like so limited by it being a TV series or whatever. I just, oh man, I really did not like the second one. Like, I could not believe it was that fucking long. I didn't like all the CG effects. And I don't know. I really didn't like. It's been a while since I've disliked a movie, and I really am like angry that I invested time in watching it. I really did not like it.
My biggest issue with a lot of like King adaptations is like I've said before, like I don't like Stephen King. I don't like his books. I think he's also kind of a very stupid human being in his fucking
He's definitely more annoying like these
yeah,
days.
now that he's just like a fucking vote blue no matter who, like liberal dude that fucking somehow got suckered into doing one of those Ukrainian interviews by a fucking prank team that J.K. Rowling did.
Oh my god.
Where he starts praising all of these people that like afterwards he'd be like, yeah, I don't know who these people were. Um, but like the one thing that I think he does well, and especially in like the book for it, is like the scene when they all get back together at the Chinese restaurant, right? And like they're just having the conversation, getting to know each other well. And like in the book, it's like that scene is so long, and like the way he like writes just this like big scene of like dialogue and people kind of reconnecting, and then all of the fucking weird shit that happens in that scene. Like neither adaptation does it well, and I think like the thing that bummed me out about it chapter 2 is like you have that cast all together in that room, and you're not gonna like do that longer and have this like cool big like cast scene of them just talking or whatever. You gotta make do I don't know, they like that was the scene that I was looking forward to the most, and I was like, this will be really interesting to see that cast interacting together for like a good chunk of time. And I think they do that whole scene in like 5 minutes or some shit, and I was like, man, come on.
Yeah, considering there's so much other just like dragged out bullshit like in the rest of the movie, in my opinion. So
Yeah, once that because like they like I which I get it, like with that cast and like having probably none of them together for a long amount of time, like that's why they break them all up and they're all on their separate stories to find their totems and shit, and like it's real stupid. I do like the first one though. Like I like that kid cast in it. And like I don't know, like I think that movie works as kind of like one of those movies that I feel like would work really well when you're like a 12-year-old diving into kind of horror movies. That's very sort of like a movie that seems like it should be kid friendly but really kind of isn't, that you watch way too young.
yeah, I don't know. I think like upon initial view, we were like, oh man, these kids are like pretty bad actors. But I think after we watched the second one, I was like, man, I kind of liked that one a lot more. Like, and I didn't even, yeah, I don't know. I guess also like the whole, I don't really respond well to another thing was I was struggling to figure out who this was like marketed towards, and I guess it was just like people nostalgic for the old one because I
basically.
re- I really like don't vibe with the whole like if you believe in it it'll happen sort of like 80s thing, like that's in so many 80s movies and 90s movies that I feel like my entire life I'm like that's so fucking stupid. Like I just feel like it's so like faux aspiration, and that just like I was kind of bothered by like how much they stuck to just like old tropes in the film.
Well, that's the thing that I think doesn't work in that one that works better with like the 90s miniseries is like
Yes.
it's the 50s in the miniseries and then, the 80s or whatever. And then this one was like the 80s and then, 2000s, which like are different, but not that different, not as vastly different as the 50s to like the 80s.
Yeah.
So like that is what I think makes the miniseries work well. Is it does work better as like this almost feels like two different fucking worlds. Where like the 80s and like into the 2000s, like everything's still just fucking capitalism. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like there's something else I was gonna bring up about those, but I don't think.
Well,
it
now I
matters.
can finally listen to the episode you did about the second one.
I mean,
So,
Bill Skarsgård is pretty fucking great in that first one as Pennywise. Is like that. Like I was really hesitant because, like I said, like I don't like Stephen King. I like the miniseries. I still think it's better than both.
I agree.
Of
I agree.
like I think part one is a better horror movie than the miniseries is, but I think the miniseries as a whole is better than the two combined, if that makes sense. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
I remember watching because I was like, there was a used like media store in Dayton that would do these, buy 5 DVDs or Blu-rays, get 5 free or whatever. So I would get so many fucking movies, and I was like, I don't know, this is free. What am I losing? So I remember getting It Chapter 1, and I remember Katie and Kit both being like, I really like this, but I was going into it as like, I don't like Stephen King. All of his adaptations are fucking garbage except Maximum Overdrive. Like, what? Why? Like, I'm probably just gonna hate this. And I think they do that opening scene with Georgie and Pennywise in the sewer really fucking well in part one. And it like sets a tone that I don't think the rest of the movie really accomplishes, although like there's some pretty fucking good creepy moments in part one, but that sewer scene I think they do really well, and Bill Skarsgård especially doing his weird fucked up eyeball things and like drooling all over the place is pretty great. But yeah, there's some messes in both of those movies.
He's fine, I feel, until he turns into like full monster mode. You know what I mean? Like he's fine as like just the clown, and like there's a part in the second movie where like Bill is confronting, his fake young self, and he like shoots the cow, the like
Yeah.
whatever the cow gun, whatever it's called, the thing from No Country for Old Men, into
The thing that like
his
kills
head.
cows in like a fucking farm.
And he like whips forward, and he's got this like big CGI clown face, and all I could think was like, man, that would look so much cooler if it was just like a big prosthetic mouth with a bunch of teeth, and then it just like flies at the camera. Like that would just look so much cooler. And I felt like just so much of it was just, I'm like, these are just 6 people running around screaming on a green screen.
That's the thing, is the CGI, especially in part 2, is pretty bad.
Yeah, it's really
like
rough.
I can like there's some of it that like in part 1 is kind of bad, but some like for the most part looks fine. Like you could tell they had more time dealing with part 1 because they didn't have the success off it that they had to immediately try to capitalize off of part 2. And like, there's a lot of stuff in part 1 that like, because in part 2 like Pennywise is barely the villain in it.
Yeah, he's like not, I feel like he's like so absent from the movie.
Yeah, and like part 1, like they do a lot of stuff of like just Bill Skarsgård being fucking creepy. Like I think the voice he chooses is way better than Tim Curry's fucking Boston accent in fucking part 1.
I don't know. I have such a soft spot
Oh
for
no,
Tim
same.
Curry.
Don't get me wrong. I fucking love part one or the mini series, but I think looking at it from a straight like actual like creepiness, I think Bill Skarsgård does a pretty
Sure.
great job at like I said. I feel like part one especially feels like a movie that like should be seen by like a room full of like 13-year-olds watching some horror movies for the first time. I think that's where it works probably its best as opposed to 30-something-year-old adults.
Yeah. So, not a fan, but as a palate cleanser, I watched Zombie 2, which obviously fucking
Yeah,
rules.
banger.
So, don't need to say anything else about Zombie 2 other than fucking watch it.
Yeah. You hate eyeballs, you will like that movie.
Oh, fucking so nasty.
I'll end up talking about these like 3 weeks ago as well. But I watched a bunch of shark movies that were terrible. I just added all the shark movies to my to-be watch list. So I've just been watching those. And most of the ones I watched this week were like rewatches. So it was like Ghost Shark and Shark in Venice and shit like that. But last night, I just watched a bunch of Cat 3 movies. So I watched Centipede Horror, which is it's fine, but a very, very big lacking of centipedes in it. Or well, there's a lot of centipedes.
You have to promise a lot of centipedes.
There's a lot of centipedes, but like they like not enough for a movie called Centipede Horror for me. But then I watched The Eternal Evil of Asia, which is this really fucking weird, half erotic horror movie, half comedy horror movie that I can't really explain about this group of dudes that go to Thailand for like a bachelor party and accidentally kill this sorcerer's sister and all get cursed to I don't know, one dude at one point calls this sorcerer a dickhead and gets his actual head turned into a dickhead, which rocks. But it turns into this thing where like to fight the sorcerer like has like this woman has to basically like to stop her fiance from being killed has to like promise herself to this sorcerer before she kills him and like fucks him while he's a ghost. And so there's a scene where she's blowing this ghost. And so it's just her
blowing this ghost.
Her mimicking a blowjob, and it's so fucking weird and kind of incredible. And then I watched Erotic Ghost Story, which is essentially just like a fucking 90% of it is like this what essentially passes like a softcore like comedy here, like one of those weird made for TV softcore comedies you would see on like USA in the middle of the night. But then it turns
it
randomly turns into like another movie with like a weird fucking sorcerer battle that like has a dude with fucking like 3 faces and like someone's head explodes. It's really strange, but I enjoyed it. I mostly watched it just to get to the second one that has Anthony Wong in it as a demon that fucks somebody with his demon tail that I want to see. That was pretty much it. Like I haven't watched a lot in the I don't know since the 5 days since we recorded the episode with Brandon for Phantom of the Ball. Yeah, I don't know. You have anything you want to shout out while you're here?
I was gonna shout out Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, but I'm gonna shout out the guy who laced the Titanic film crew's chowder with PCP, and that resulted in James Cameron getting stabbed in the face by one of the crew members with a pen. So that's my shout out. That when I read that story, which like clearly it had circulated the internet like for quite a few years before I saw it, and I saw it as like a meme on Instagram, that fucking blew my mind. And I sent it to you, and I was like, I love this because like. I don't know how you feel about James Cameron. I'm not a big fan of his. I think he's pretty obnoxious and annoying. So I thought it was pretty hilarious that somebody stabbed him in the face with a pen.
Him as a person is whatever. But, like, you know, most of his movies up to a certain point are pretty sick.
Yeah, same.
But, like, yeah. I do like the story, though, of him pitching Aliens, too, where he's just, like, writes alien on a chalkboard. And then an S, and they're like, yeah, but what about that? And then he just puts 2 lines through it to make a $sign, and they're like, all right, we're sold.
I mean, it's a stroke of genius. You know what I mean? And also, he made a pretty sick movie.
There's been this thing lately I keep seeing on Instagram where people are losing their mind, realizing that like one of the big sweeping shots of the Titanic is a animation. And I'm like, what the fuck did you think this was? Number one, it looks like an animation. It looks like a cartoon, essentially. Like, you know, it's like a computer animated fucking cartoon.
Okay.
But I was like, did you think James Cameron built a Titanic to shoot this movie on?
I mean, he built like a set, but he didn't like recreate the Titanic.
It's like this sweeping shot that goes around like the whole ship, and you see people walking around out in the middle of the fucking ocean. Like, do you think this was practical? I don't know. It's very funny. I didn't think about doing shout-outs prior. what have I been listening to? Let's see. Spotify will open. Go listen to Harmonicraft by Torch.
Oh yeah, great album.
I hadn't listened to it in a long time, and I forgot how good it was.
Torch rules.
I
saw them a few months ago. I was bummed to see what's happening with that. So I'm just assuming they're going to be defunct after Steve Brooks leaves the band.
Oh, what's been going on? I don't know if I've seen anything about that.
Oh yeah, he announced like a while ago that he was leaving Torch after the tour with Meshuggah later on in the year.
What a weird lineup.
Yeah, I know. Torch, Converge, and Meshuggah. Very strange.
Converge and Meshuggah like to fucking tour together for some reason, it seems.
I haven't seen Converge, so that's mostly the reason I'm going. So yeah, that's going on. That's happening, and I guess it's because they're just located in like drastically different parts of the country, and it's just like impossible for them to like, or not impossible, but it's just difficult for them to coordinate and like put out new stuff. And I guess that's like been the reason. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else going on, so I'm assuming that like the rest of the people in the band will probably just like do another band or something like that.
Sure.
So, but it doesn't seem to be like an acrimonious split, you know.
Oh yeah,
they seem to be completely fine when I saw them play a few months ago.
He's also a dude probably at least upper 40s going into 50s that has been touring for fucking ever because he was
long time.
So yeah, let him have a break.
Yeah,
they'll do that thing where they break up and 5 years later they'll be back like everybody else.
Yeah. They'll just do like more like limited touring and shit like that.
Yeah.
Good album though. Great album.
All right, next week, if I drop this, I don't know. I don't know what's coming next week, but I think it'll probably be. I'll probably drop this around the week before we do Dr. Giggles. So I'm gonna say Dr. Giggles will be next week. So we'll see. If not, it'll be something else, and you'll see. Maybe Death Toilet.
Death Toilet. Jesus.
Do you want to tell people where they can find you and Diary of Doom and all that shit?
Yeah, you can follow Diary of Doom. The podcast is on Spotify and Apple and probably elsewhere. You can listen to it on podbean.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. So you can it's just Diary of Doom. And I'm just putting out the podcast. You know, I took a little break for a while there, had to get some shit reorganized, but I'm kind of back at it now. And anything that was on the Patreon previously is now just going to be put out for free because I was like, why am I doing this? It's like the most niche fucking shit. So, but yeah, that's what's going on. And, there's hopefully those episodes where I talked about movies will find a new home somewhere. So we'll see about those because I was very proud of those episodes and I really liked where that kind of spin-off was going, and I'm really interested in trying to do that again. I just like don't really know how many people give a shit about it, but I don't care. I have fun talking about terrible movies with heavy metal soundtracks.
I don't know if we've talked about it, but I watched the Final Evil Bong movie, and not great. So
I fully did not expect them to be good.
We can talk about that in, I don't know, 3 years when we get to the final one.
We'll probably talk about it next year.
Yeah, we'll just fucking knock them all out next year.
Yeah, there's no point in spending more time talking about those fucking movies.
Yeah, and all of them at this point are like barely an hour long, so...
Beautiful.
yeah, if you want to follow us or support us on Patreon, patreon.com/IP7podcast. I'm guessing around the time this comes out, our last bonus episode, unless someone else signs up, where patrons pick a triple feature. The dudes from Porcelain Peak podcast picked hosts, and the host for us to watch.
Oh my god. So is that? So wait a minute, hold on. So that's the host, the Korean monster movie, host, the one that's on. Is that like the Shudder movie?
Host is the Shudder found footage movie that I fucking hate.
Okay.
The host from.
Oh, is that the one that they filmed on like Zoom? Okay, yeah.
And then I don't know what Hosts is. I've never heard of it, but it also came out the same year as a Host, so we're gonna be saying Host a lot.
I really thought you said Hostess for a second.
Yeah.
I was like, you're just watching like a block of Hostess commercials?
I don't know what that episode's going to be a fucking disaster.
I mean, the host rules.
Yes, the host rules. I don't know what Hosts is about.
And they're making you watch that movie.
I'm not rewatching it. I've seen it twice. I can rant about Blumhouse and Rob Savage without having to rewatch it. So yeah, that'll be some point in September. You can buy merch at our storefront tier. Leave us a rating on Spotify, rating and review on iTunes. You can follow us on Instagram at IP Stuff Podcast. Follow. Yeah, fuck Kit. Go join Katie's.
Follow him. Don't fuck him.
Yeah, do both. I don't know. Kit's on things as Kitrification Blood and Hidden Kitstery. Just type it on any of those social medias. You might find him. Katie at Werewolfface, at her Patreon at patreon.com/werewolfface. You can listen to my other podcast, AK Movie Club. Dylan, always a pleasure.
Thank you. And apologies for talking way too much.
Yeah, it's fine. That's what we're here for. Alright, I hope you're a scum dog of the universe, but why?